everyone, and welcome. I'm Barbara with Project Kin, a community of family historians who are hooked on stories. We have more ways to tell stories today than ever before. In fact, I think of this as a golden age of family storytelling. And here at Project Kin, we're all about sorting out best practices and ways to inspire each other with these new ways of storytelling. Because at the end of the day, from my perspective, it's so important that we get every story told, no matter how, what form it takes, public or private. It's important to get our family stories told. So today I'm here to share a story, a little bit of a story, but mostly it is about a tool that I used and kind of it had been out there and I'd been aware of using it, but I finally discovered how to use it for family history and in particular how to use it to connect members of a community. So I'm going to walk you through that. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to share, welcome. I'm going to share my slides. Hold on just a moment, please. So as we get started, many of you will know about my talking about this early on in our many Project Kin posts on Substack and many other things. I've been fascinated with this story of this of the bicentennial, as it is the bicentennial 13-month period of the visit of this French aristocrat to our young country here in the United States. And I always wondered, where were my ancestors? Did they meet the Marquis de Lafayette? So just briefly about the Marquis story, so you have a little bit of the context. But in today's program, I'm really going to be focusing on how to use a core historical story to connect a community, because in my view, that's where the real opportunity lies. And it's not so obvious as to how to do that. So I will then walk through, this is for me a project recipe. So I will walk through a recipe to show you how you can copy this timeline, literally copy this timeline to create one of your own and share your own stories. Because at the end of the day, as I said, that's really, in my view, what it's all about. So first, let's start a little bit with Gilbert de Mortier, the Marquis de Lafayette, which is why I usually just call him Lafayette, who was active, of course, in the late 18th century to the early 19th century, which was such a remarkable period of time in our modern history as it occurred. He was a 19-year-old French aristocrat whose parents had died young. He was one of the wealthiest people in all of France. For a variety of reasons, he managed to get himself trained with the King Louis XVI's Black Musketeers, trained. His family history dated back to these great warriors of French history. So he had every expectation that he was going to be this great warrior. And so he was kind of spoiling for a fight. And like many French aristocrats, was out knocking at the door of the Americans whose revolution had just started by 1776 and wanted to play. The difference was he stepped in with a pile of cash and basically said, that's fine, I'll pay my own way, no worries. So he steps in to fight, and actually he really was quite well trained and became quite a significant player in the war itself. See the Hamilton musical, he has an important role in there. And on returning to France at the end of the, actually he returned a few times during the war, but he returns to France after the conclusion of the war and the signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1783. He then gets in the middle of the French Revolution because he was really a serious idealist and kept trying to push these ideas that the independence in the United States could be translated into France with a monarchy and a level of democracy. But that kind of didn't work. And he very much got in the middle of the revolution and, in fact, ended up in a dungeon, lost many of his in-laws' family were lost to the revolution. So fast forward a few more years, he gets himself out of the dungeon. He is at this point nearly penniless, and his old friends in whom he knew during the revolution, including James Madison, invite him back to be the nation's guest. So in 1824, they invite him back to the United States, and once he comes back, he gets the lay of the land, and the committee of assignments starts arranging his schedule for where he should go. And pretty soon he ends up staying for 13 months and taking on a tour of the entire country, all 24 states at that point. So, in my view, this creates a nationally experienced moment. And I immediately said, well, where were my people? Because as an American, we kind of get excited about the fact that, hey, I had ancestors who were around in the colonial period. Hey, I had some that actually fought in the Revolution. Oh my, where were those people? Well, by definition, they survived because I'm here. And his 390-day journey across 24 states just creates this timeline. And as I dove into it, you can see from everything from newspapers to artifacts that there was a lot of just-in-time planning, a lot of figuring it out. And he was a very big presence in a lot of very small towns to make a very local character. And many living Americans today, like me, can trace their family history to ancestors who were alive during this period of tremendous growth, both in population, and of course, this was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution as well. So we see many transformative 19th century impact happening by the 1820s, including newspapers, mass-produced items, things like this. So a public timeline that can be readily modified to see where your ancestors were during that period, I thought would be something really interesting that a lot of other people could share in doing that. So I mentioned artifacts. I'm kind of disappointed that my own ancestors didn't think to have any of these kinds of artifacts. They were produced by the millions. Imagine little white leather gloves with his own face stamped on it. And of course, the first thing to do is to put your hand out and have him kiss your hand. And then you treasure this hand, this glove. That was a thing. He actually wrote about that one, or his secretary wrote about that one in his journal. This plate that walks through a classic blue and white transferware that was very popular at the time, celebrating his arrival in America. And then, of course, the kinds of local presses that were putting out these kinds of invitations and announcements and moments published everywhere he went. So why a timeline? What is my thing about timelines? So as I said at the beginning, as Project Kin, I'm all about encouraging families to tell their stories. I see this timeline as creating a very easy way to connect historical facts in a way that you can also to your family elements of the story, and that you can share it in the context of historical facts. And then the bonus course here is that this is just happens to be one set of facts that I pursued to tell this story. It could be anything else. In fact, fun fact, I've already started on the America 250 because I couldn't help it. And my own American history is horrible, just terrible. I had very poor education in this, and it's humbling right now as we approach our semi-sesquicentennial to really look at how little I understand about the lead up to the American Revolution. So I'm doing a little bit of study as I go through this. Well, why this timeline? Well, again, I love this story. This guy is an amazing idealist, despite every conceivable thing that got in his way. I also was fortunate to have a reliable source of historical facts that I could use to make this a good example. And here's where I was very fortunate to be able to be connected with the American Friends of Lafayette, which is an organization that's been around since the beginning of the 20th century. And I've been focusing on the idealism, the writing, the stories of the Marquis. And we're all in on making a big deal about this bicentennial. You'll find more about them at Lafayette200.org. They are very focused in local events in every one of these local villages. I was taking a different angle. And that really comes down to the difference between looking at a map, which is something, this is from the Lafayette200.org site, and a timeline, because I couldn't really squeeze my own family story into this kind of a map. I wanted it to go by the events themselves and the order in which they came. A timeline also combined with maps can tell a story better together. And I think that's really important. I'm not trying to do everything in one little tool. The idea is to have the tool complement a larger set. In this case, as I said, I learned about this as part of a celebration, which was also the 75th celebration of a particular group that I'm part of, happening in the little town of Lafayette, California. Well, they had a library event. So these here are these just big, sort of trade show style displays. There's 6 of these displays in the library to commemorate it, along with little history displays and lectures and things like that, to make something that everybody in the local town could really get behind and understand. So it was a pleasure to be part of all of that, but this little piece was just one of that larger story of what it did. So it is this timeline. It is quite directly an interactive tool that works both on desktops as well as mobile devices. And it leverages a tool. I didn't write this. This is all based on code, JavaScript code runs in your browser, designed for journalists at the journalism department at Northwestern University, where they have a special program called the Night Lab. And it's called Night Lab JS, Timeline JS from the Night Lab. You can find it at nightlab.com. And it's not new. It's been around for a dozen years, and I've wanted to use it for a long time as well, as a matter of fact. It's highly interactive, and as I said, media rich. Each slide supports, one of these pages is a slide, and each slide supports a headline, a subhead, some amount of media of any variety of different types of media, copy, and links. And then you can adjust the timeline zoom level for what's comfortable for you to see. You can, individual viewers can zoom in on it. And then I can have blocks of the items appear in different eras of time. In this case, I've chosen to separate it by which states were visited. And you can see he made many visits to some of a few of the northeastern states, not surprisingly. And then ribbons to group events by some other characteristic. And in this case, you'll see that I used that to group my local stories from the actual historical elements. So let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of how this actually works. It's really a spreadsheet. I started with an Excel spreadsheet that was shared with me by the good people at the American Friends of Lafayette, and that had the historical data that their historians had been working with to plan for their event series. I then poured that data, which is just lines of from a spreadsheet, into a Google Sheet that is pre-configured by the Night Lab Timeline JS tool. And that has the code built into the spreadsheet. So it's not just an ordinary spreadsheet. I then went through, and this is the part, as I was saying as we were chatting earlier, this is the part where I went through each line item to choose which were there were 600 lines or something, and I narrowed it down to another 160 or so, I think, to cover the major events as they hit in each of the 24 states. I didn't need to do every single day. And then I had to go find sources and images and references to describe how those moments have been described out there on the internets. All of this, of course, doing my best to document the sources and the pieces. And in fact, the content is directly embedded from external content. So it is still there. And you can see all of that by looking directly at the spreadsheet. And then this timeline, the Timeline JS tool, you pop it back into the tool and you pops back out with the link to the page.
and it actually will update once you have flowed it through the spreadsheet, through the system. It will pop back out with any updates that you make in real time, which is kind of cool. So here it is, walking through the community connections. So as I said, what I wanted to do was to make the connection of our community, in this case, Project Kin members. Thank you very much, Cynthia. And the timeline of events from during the actual during his timeline. So here you can see all the items in this olive color are all coming from our community. But if you click outside of that, we're going to items that were other parts of his history. So the community members could be anyone, of course. It could be a historical society. It could be a genealogical society or other family members or anything else. So to bring that data, that external data into the form, well, you use a form. Into the spreadsheet, you use a form. Google Forms is super easy to use. And I even include a draft of a form you can reuse if you'd like. What I did was have these forms feeds not my master spreadsheet, but rather it feeds its own response summary, which I then take and paste in. You never want to connect your work to the general public that just anybody can pop in, because frankly, yeah, hackers are gonna hack. You can see the example of my form, which again, thank you. Cynthia was kind enough, and several of our Project Kin members were kind enough to give me some examples to get started with, but you see that at projectkin.org Lafayette-form. And I'll have all of these links in the project recipe, so don't need to rush out to do that. So let me walk through with you. Don't worry, I won't scare the full detail. That's all in the project recipe that you'll get. I've talked about a spreadsheet. So this is the Google sheet that is used to feed the Timeline.js tool. These are the line items. You'll see they directly map to what the timeline tool you were just seeing a moment ago. They do require very strict formatting in order for each of these steps to fit in. The media must be a public link, for example. Your captions come in. You can have links in the captions and the body. It took me a few tries to learn how to do that, so I'm not completely consistent all the way through because I figured it out late. The ribbons will appear as groups, so the name has to be consistent. So community connection is the word that I used to associate everybody in our group. And then you can selectively add a background color. So you'll see that's a hex color that I used for each of these, and they must be in their specified columns or it doesn't work. Again, you have options for how to make this thing your own. You can go through and add your stories to my Lafayette timeline using that form. You can also create your own variation of this Lafayette timeline, because I'm going to give you my original list of the events, and then you can go create your own that I never even have to see. It's pretty cool the way it works that way. And then I'm also going to show you how you can use this to create your own timeline of absolutely anything else you want. So first, to talk a little bit about how to add your story to my timeline. It's very simple. You fill in my form. That's it. I go through, I get it in a response page coming in out of Excel. I copy paste into chunks at the bottom of my spreadsheet, and bada bing, bada boom, it appears as a line item. So many of you will remember seeing Christopher Paget's post not long ago about how his ancestor possibly met with the shoemaker, possibly met Lafayette. And he was gracious enough to share details to that. And that was like last week, bada bing, bada boom, it's in there. Just took me a few minutes to do. Similarly, you can create your own. And here is the short version of how you would do that. Again, the long version will be in my recipe. You start with the data that I'm going to share with you, and you make a copy of my data. Then you go into the timeline tool at nightlab.com, and you click the get the timeline template. So you're going to start with my data set, but you're going to go to their site to copy their template. You need that because that template includes all of the actual code embedded into the spreadsheet. You then, from that base data, you're going to paste my data into their spreadsheet, deleting the example data that comes in it. And then you go, once you have it good enough, you go back to the timeline template and follow their steps 3 and 4, which essentially have you paste in the link from a designated place, make a few selections on options, and it gives you a link. That link is the spreadsheet. I still find that wondrous, simple thing. But you can also use all of this with the blah, blah, blah that I described to now go do your own. You don't need me for this. This is following the instructions. I give you a number of tips that I discovered while using it, things that weren't terribly well documented. In my view, in the timeline data, more than anything, I found the important thing to do is to follow their instructions precisely for their part of the instructions. Some of the other parts that took me a minute to figure out had to do with when and how to use standard, for example, AHRF references in order to make links active in your pages of your article. So here you go. This is how you would simply walk through it. The yellow stickies there are trying to show you steps that you would have to do as opposed to the very first case, which is show me the data. So depending on your experience level with Google Sheets and Forms, this may seem pretty easy. You now know it's possible. And if you get stumped, go ask a kid. Because frankly, these days, kids starting in probably elementary school, 5th graders, are using Google Sheets, Google Docs. They do this kind of thing all the time. It's not hard at all. Can tell you that timelines engage a community. They're like, oh, what's that? Just showing a QR code gets people excited about ways that they can see what this thing is. And again, you can use it with any kind of historical, genealogical, community, lineage group, anything like that. And that was really where I was headed with this, to say, hey, all of us share this history. Let's go look at it together. Maybe our ancestors were there at the same time. So it's a perfect way to go through and look at time-based data. And again, forms make it super easy to add the data now and format it later. And really, this tool takes advantage of making the formatting pretty easy for you, because you frankly just don't have a lot of choices. You'd have to go into the code at a deeper level to do a lot more of the fancier configuration details, which I didn't even touch. But poking around, I found lots of other people using this. This one, I just happened to be at Pitt University, and somewhere I looked up Borges. I don't remember what it was, but sure enough, here it is, a whole detailed timeline of his history that frankly, any family historian would love at borges.pitt.edu. It's the Borges Center at the University of Pittsburgh. And you'll see this kind of thing used a lot by academic institutions and, of course, journalists. Things that I have learned is that, again, it's great for correlating these stories, but you don't want to push too much detail into one timeline. I would argue in this case, they kind of, it could benefit from a little space, a little air, a way to be able to use the whole screen to see it all. And I think that's kind of, sometimes these are factors just stumped by where you are and what you're trying to do. Keep in mind what the objective is. And you want to add context when you share a timeline. I haven't been sharing this timeline directly. I talk about it at projectkin.org/Lafayette, because that's a landing page that takes you to what and why I was doing what it is, and then you can go see the timeline. And I think that can be a very powerful way to do that. You can also have multiple timelines linked from one landing page, for example. So on all of these things, always looking at good design principles can make a huge difference to how you go about it. So in the context of physical space, I talked a little bit already about how we were doing this originally for an event. It happened a couple weeks ago now. It was a community lecture, a library display with these exhibits, and a wreath laying ceremony. The whole town came out there. Who knew there was a fife and drum corps of local kids that played? It was a big fun event. In order to connect my timeline, for example, to the banners in the library, I use the same color scheme. So these are the colors that are of all of the images. See that image there? All of the images that were on the display, I wanted to bring those into the timeline so that people could see that connection. As much as I might care about where my family falls in all this, somebody visiting the library in Lafayette, California really don't give a damn. So I wanted to give it a context to what they were already seeing. Personally, I think this story about James Armistead Lafayette is one of the most fascinating and undertold stories about Lafayette out there. It's a remarkable story, and I wanted to make sure to highlight that. They did too. He appears in a couple of these different banners that were part of the event. Graphics, signage, colors, the subtle ways in which you present things really make a difference whether someone sees it. So as you may focus, this is an area you feel very comfortable in, that's totally fine. I'm going to pause that video so it doesn't take up too much of my bandwidth. And bring in somebody to help you with that graphic presentation or work together with a team depending on what you're trying to get across. In this case, I was working with a team presenting something in a library. So I allowed for the beautifully designed pieces to tell me what I should pick up on in the timeline. This is a flyer here that was on a stand in the library with QR codes for the kids to pull up their mobile devices. It's not great on mobile, I'll be clear, but it's better than nothing. And it does get someone on their way to seeing it on a desktop. And all of these tools, including the library displays and so on, I'd be happy to share. Those are not part of the recipe at the moment. So as family history plan your archive strategy, I'm hearing you. I'm thinking of you, Kathy Stone. Your core data, in this case, lives in a spreadsheet. You can export it as a CSV file. You can keep it as a Google Sheet. You can do all of the above. You can keep the linked data, the images, in a stored and a special place. In my case, 90% of the images were all out there in the web anyway. But there are a handful that I couldn't, and I can talk a little bit about how I solved that problem, which is, I think, a little interesting and instructive for other use cases as well. Planning your citations so that it is properly referenced and documented so that others can follow along. And, look at other ways to output what you create. You can output it to video. You can output it to other kinds of formats, like even screenshots, to be sure that each piece is captured and not lost. A few best practice solutions from my perspective, having gone through this. One is you start with the goal. You've heard me say this before. It's tempting to play with new technology. I'm certainly always guilty of that one, at risk of it, certainly, but only do that where it is solving a specific problem, and always be looking at the context you wrap around that so it's meaningful. Timelines, in my view, are especially valuable as a way of connecting stories across a community and connecting those to historical experiences. Creating an easy link that in the form of a short code like projectkin.org/Lafayette that's memorable, and possibly a QR code that anybody could follow with their phone to bring it up and then use with others to re-engage visitors. A timeline that's interactive creates a fun factor. To me, that was the most compelling bit. It got people to stop and notice. It was a headline. That's what I was trying to do. It's about the story, but you need a hook to pull them in. There were two hooks for me here. One was the fundamental question: hey, did my ancestors meet the Marquis de Lafayette? I don't know. And then the second thing is a technology hook that seemed fun, that gets people excited, especially in a community environment. You can go ahead and explore you'll go to the landing page at /Lafayette, and I will include the recipe and all of the details with the recording in whatever form it takes here, so that you can learn and explore from that. So let's stop share and come back, I hope, to a better connection. Let me turn my video back on and completely get out of that. And hello, everybody. Video back on. There. So, any questions, thoughts? Welcome, everyone. I can see you now. It's in doing a presentation like this that you realize really how far behind our tech is. It shouldn't be so hard. And that it's popping and gasping with the bandwidth. I mean, come on, man. I got a gigabit back here. What's the problem? So thank you very much for your patience through all of this. And I will have a better recording of it to share later. Go ahead, please, Jackie.
I would say Zoom crashed for several hours yesterday, so I'm not surprised Zoom might be having some issues.
Thank you for that excuse. I will take that one and own it.
Because I missed about 3 different sessions I was supposed to be in because I could not get into Zoom, and it was not just my computer, it was everywhere.
Oh yeah. No, it was a national major outage. I think it's an outage that they will be having to confess onto their stock report next quarter. My whole family were chatting in our little family chat about, wow, I saw Zoom went down. Oh yeah, blah blah blah. All 4 of us were affected by it in one way or another.
Spotify was out in the morning. PayPal was, well, I don't know about PayPal, but there were 5 or 6 others. I found a website that actually will tell you what's down.
Down detector.
No.
Down. Oh, there's 1,000 eyes. There are many out there that do that, and it's very helpful. Most sites, you can go to status dot whatever their domain is, and they should tell you. We had a major outage with Substack, a quarter ago, something like that, that was out for a day and a half even. It was a long time. If you want to share what you found for a tracker, that would be helpful. Feel free to share that in the chat.
I posted it in another group I'm in.
Okay, cool.
Oh, is it down right now?
Oh, yeah.
I will copy that link and
Sure.
see if I can do it from there.
Now, Kevin.
Yes.
We've chatted earlier, and you all will know Kevin for your Substack. Go ahead and share the name of your Substack and tell me a little bit about what this reminds you of and how you think you might use this kind of thing.
Yeah, so my Substack is the Centenarian Playbook, and well, it started about my grandfather's winery, and then it evolved into my grandmother and her journey of making it to 100. She's turning 104 in June. But I have a number of stories that I've written about my great-grandfather's immigration from Italy to Santa Clara County. And I'm actually attending a talk in Berkeley, I think it's next week, about an Italian author who has written about the immigration of people from Piedmont to, I'm not sure if it's all of the US or just California. And that's right in the heart of when my great-grandfather came over with his winemaking skills. And there's a number of other wineries in the Santa Cruz Mountains that also started around the same time, Bargetto, as well as Guglielmo. And so I've been planning to play around with since Barbara tipped me off on the story maps. I've been planning to design a story map of that immigration. And because I also have some pinpoints in northern Italy where my great grandfather worked in France and Germany, and then back to Piedmont before he came out to California. And so I think it would be interesting to plot that along with the story maps, as well as the timeline that Barbara has talked about.
So to be clear, story maps is another tool for journalists from the same Night Lab Foundation or Night Lab at Northwestern University. So it's kind of the next one I want to play with, looking at my family's migration from New England to the so-called dismal swamps of North Carolina as Quaker families. And then back up through the Ohio Valley to Indiana, as many other families do. And the point that I want to underscore with both of these tools is I think what makes them really interesting for family historians is that they lend themselves really well to collaboration, to integrating multiple stories into a tool that sets a context that other stories can then hook off of. And this is something that we could never do with books, right? I mean, you could with a library, but it creates a new way to do this. And we think about these things as something that publishers do. And I think if I get no other idea across, it's that no, regular people can do this. And it's not hard, especially if you start with a chunk of history that you are also interested in, that you have in common in, and somebody else has already done the work, which is what I tried to do. So I'm looking forward to working with you on your story map. My story is going to be
Awesome.
a different story, but I can't wait to see that. And, hey, we should have coffee or have a glass of wine while you're here.
Absolutely.
Kevin is with me here in the San Francisco Bay Area, although the other side of town, a lot of traffic between us.
Yeah.
But it's a special occasion to have you come over here.
Great. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. Other thoughts and perspectives?
Well, I just found another reason to learn JSON.
Well, the cool thing is you don't have to do that.
But I wanna.
Okay, then you can. Then let me. Hey, here's a question. Where are the tools designed for family historians? Leveraging JSON or JavaScript or anything else? I mean, huh?
I have no clue.
Thanks for saying
Well,
that, because I don't either have any clue.
Well, I like to think
and
that,
not sure that I'm that my techie partner there, Barbara, that I might leave that all up to you.
well, you are my partner in archiving. And so this might be a good time to give a plug for next Thursday's program. Kathy Stone. Oh,
We're gonna
actually,
talk about timelines, but in a much shall I say simpler, because I've used them, format. But I'll mention again Barbara's, because this is a good example of one, and I've already started thinking about examples to put that to use for my family history. Might have a little bit of trouble because again, I'm in Canada, so we're only our history doesn't go back quite as far, but I thought I'd start with the Hudson's Bay Company, which tragically has just declared bankruptcy. It was purchased, it's been a Canadian company since the 1600s, was purchased by an American, forget what you call them, with like capital investor type persons, and a couple of years ago, and now has shut down and declared bankruptcy. So we're losing all of our stores and that we had forever. So that, well, we'll have left is the history. And sadly for me, that was one of my very first jobs, was to work in the Hudson's Bay. I won't tell you, in the bargain basement, as it was called back then. So it was quite the experience. But I digress. We're going to talk about timelines next week in organizing our family photos. That's what Kathy's Corner focuses on, is organizing our photos. And we've been talking about exploring mystery photos, those photos you have that you don't know who they are or what they're of, and you're sure, should I just throw these in the garbage, or should I maybe try and figure out if there's something really important? And so we mentioned it at the very end of the last session, and that's what we're going to talk about next week. And so Barbara has shown you a perfect example of a fascinating type of timeline. And we've got a couple more. Anne is going to join us with the one she has got. I'm going to save the surprise for what kind of timeline she's got made up, but she's going to show us one that she's got. And I'll have a couple other examples to show of various timelines we can use that can help with organizing our photos, and also keeping track of the stories, which is, again, always our most important thing. So.
And with the tips that Kathy has shared with me, I'm dropping them into a spreadsheet and producing a timeline as an example that you can, again, use, asking the key questions that Kathy asks, like, things that that are physical that will appear in photos. When did I live? Where did we go for holidays? What was the dog's name, and how long did the dog live? Where was the dog? And then you see all of these on a timeline. And now the timeline is not about publishing any kind of story at all. It's just a tool. It's just a tool. It may as well be Post-it notes taped to a wall, except it takes a lot less room.
Anyone can
Barbara?
Yes.
Oh, I found that absolutely wonderful. And
Okay.
I can't wait to dive into the notes and actually this could be my Easter project, as if I haven't got enough. But anyway, one more project doesn't hurt, does it? But I'm absolutely ashamed to say that I had never heard of Lafayette until you first posted about him. I pride myself that, I love history, and I also have always enjoyed American history. I had never heard of him. So I can't wait to go off and to the library and see if hopefully here I can find some sort of book to read a bit more about his story, because it sounds fascinating.
Well, there's a lot of books available as ebooks and in
Yep.
libraries and so on that that you can borrow as well. I barely was aware of him. And a fun fact, if you jump ahead I won't attempt to share my screen and show it, doggone it, but you can now take yourself to the spreadsheet or rather to the timeline, and go explore basically the month of October in 1824, which was the lead up to the big battle, which happens at Yorktown, where basically the Continental Army traps Cornwallis in a corner and defeats Cornwallis, who was this huge English hero. And, in defeating Cornwallis, Lafayette kind of gets a lot of the credit for defeating Cornwallis, makes him a big hero in France, because, of course, in France, they kind of weren't real fond of the British. And it's just so many great stories as they go all the way through it. As you'll see in my timeline, I didn't know this either. As you'll see in my timeline, he has an important part in the musical Hamilton. I had no idea. It's one of those things that suddenly gives me more context to better understand it's like suddenly becoming a grown-up and saying, oh, that's what they were talking about.
So he died young.
Yeah.
What
was
the cause of his death?
Lafayette actually lived for those days a pretty long life. He lived into his mid-70s. Yeah. He lived until his mid, and that's what's remarkable, that he started so young. He was only 19 in 1777 when he shows up in Britain, or late 1776. He shows up in and gets to go meet Washington in order to sign up to become part of the Continental Army. And that's how come he lived so long. I have an ancestor, so that's why most of the Revolutionary War veterans didn't live to see him, but those that did, he went out of his way to meet with them. And there's one famous story where somewhere in upstate New York, he sees a guy that introduces him to a collection of the elderly now veterans, and one of the guys that actually saved him when he was his first battle, he gets shot and has a giant bullet in his leg, and they haul him off to get the best of care. The guy that carried him out of the battle was there, and he remembered him, and he makes the comments and so on. The guy's actual name is a little murky in history, but it's right. I have the newspaper articles, so I pulled that one up too. Frankly, I think this is just a great tool while you're doing research, because it lets you just keep finding little nuggets and dropping it into the timeline, even if nobody else ever sees it. It's really useful for collecting stories. Like I said, I'm using it now to get my head around what happened when. Tomorrow is the 19th, Friday, Saturday is the 250th anniversary of the battle at Lexington, or the first shots fired in Lexington. And so I'm like, yeah, what happened? Why was that important? So anyway, if you want in on my America 250, let me know. Oh, Jackie, come on down. Come on down.
And I always hop over to Northwestern University.
That's right. You're in Chicago, right? Or the area?
Live in Evanston.
Oh, perfect. So here's my thing. I'm like going nuts with this tool for family history. I looked up the site, the guy who is it looks like the big cheese over there, the director of the Knight Lab or the Knight Center, seems to be a former New York Times digital guy. What would he say if I reached out? I'm like, cool, whatever. So if there's any way that anybody over there, I'd be delighted to make a connection and compliment them.
Unfortunately, I don't know too many Northwestern professors. I knew one Loyola, and then I went to DePaul.
Oh, really? My dad went to DePaul.
I got a master's in new media studies.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go.
I was going to AMU for a master's in military history. Then I was going to go to George Mason for a PhD, or as we call it, piled iron deeper, in digital history.
Uh-huh.
Fortunately, I ran out of money and never got the second master's and never moved to Virginia.
Well, but you have the interest and you're sharing it here now.
Yes.
Okay.
Old age also got in the way.
Yeah, well, I understand. I understand. So really, maybe this is a good place to button it up, because I want to button it up with an invitation to all of you, and all of you watching this as a video. As Project Kin, I really am all about the stories and enabling the stories so that families can get the stories told in any way that works for you, public, private, form. I don't care. I want stories to be told, and I'm here to help you get that done. And as I see talent in people like you, Jackie, with these deep resources and perspectives about tools and insights, I hope our community can help each other with that kind of thing. Kathy, with our focus on archiving, to me, the difference between kind of writing a report, kind of writing a thing, and making it a family history thing is whether it's documented properly, archived properly to be here when your ancestors are ready for it, when they're ready to hear those stories. And I think that kind of thing is just foundational to what we're doing. I am deeply grateful to my ancestors who left me an extraordinary collection of materials that I certainly wasn't ready for. Earlier in my life, I never even knew my grandmother, who was this genealogist, my grandfather, who was the photographer. And now I am the one to have the privilege of playing with these materials, but it's really just as a custodian. And I think all of us can, I'm always learning how to do this from you, and look forward to ways to help us as a community share more with each other. So
And I'm
thank you.
forward to next week, but I need to go because I have a doctor's appointment in 1 minute.
I understand. Thank you so
Wonderful.
much.